Find a comfortable position. Let your body settle into its weight. Allow your breathing to even out. There is no destination to reach tonight, no arrival to consider. The journey has already slowed. The path will carry itself. When you are ready, we begin. Tonight's story is called A Day in the Life of a 17th Century Shipwreck Diver. Dawn hasn't properly lifted yet, but the deck lights have already been turned down to their smallest practical glow. They sit in shallow pools along the rail, enough to show where the metal changes height, not enough to make the sea feel crowded. The research vessel holds a gentle, working stillness, not silence, not bustle, just a quiet readiness that seems to come from repetition and habit rather than urgency. Near the stern, a drying rack is lashed in place with two lengths of rope, and neoprene hangs from it in dark folds, heavy with yesterday's rinse. The air carries salt and a faint tang of rubber, softened by the clean, cold smell that comes off open water before breakfast has begun in the galley. A mug sits on a crate beside the equipment bench, steam curling up in a thin thread. The heat vanishes quickly, as though the morning is taking it back. The bench itself is organized in a way that only looks casual. Everything has a place, even the things that pretend not to. Clips and carabiners line up along a strip of magnetic metal. A slate lies face down, so the chalk doesn't smear. A small waterproof torch rests on its side, not rolling because a wedge of foam has been cut precisely for it. Next to that sits a spool of guideline, the cord neatly wound, the free end secured with a single, tidy knot that can be undone with gloves on. This is the first part of the day, checking and touching, not because anything is expected to be wrong, but because the body settles when it knows. Fingers find buckles, buckles click and unclick, straps pull through hands and lie flat without twists. A gauge is lifted into the light, angled until the needle can be read without strain. The numbers don't matter as much as the steady confidence they bring. The glass is wiped once with a thumb, then left alone. Beyond the rail, the surface of the sea moves like dark fabric being turned over slowly. Each small swell catches a hint of the deck lights, then lets it go. The horizon is there, but it's indistinct as though the ocean hasn't decided where to draw the line yet. Somewhere out in that dimness lies the site, a sunken wreck marked on charts, described in reports, argued over in briefings. On paper, it has coordinates, depth, orientation. Here, in the cool morning, it feels more like a place that waits. A diver's routine begins long before water touches skin. It starts with weight distribution and the simple question of comfort. The harness is lifted, held for a moment to feel how it hangs, then laid across a shoulder. The fabric bites lightly through the suit. A strap is tightened until it's firm, then eased the smallest amount, a concession to breathing. The buckle's metal is cold against a gloved knuckle. The sensation is clean and awake. A low sound comes from the vessel's side as a line shifts against a fender. The noise isn't sharp, more like a slow rub, a reminder that everything is connected to everything else. Someone has already opened the locker where the reels are stored. The door sits ajar, rocking slightly. Inside, coiled lines and spare masks are stacked in disciplined rows. A laminated checklist is clipped to the inner panel, corners worn from being lifted and returned. Coffee is taken in short sips between tasks. The mug warms the palm through the glove. The warmth spreads up the wrist, then fades as soon as attention returns to the bench. A hand reaches for a mask, checks the skirt for grit, traces the edge as if reading it in braille. The strap is stretched once, then settled back into place. There's no need to rush the movements. Slow is safer, and slow is kinder. The day in the life rhythm settles in. Prepare, verify, simplify. A torch is switched on, not for the beam, but for the certainty of its response. The light paints a pale stripe across the bench, catches on tiny scratches in the metal, then is clicked off again. A second torch is checked in the same way, placed at a different angle so they won't knock together. A spare cutting tool is clipped to a webbing loop, positioned where a hand can find it without searching. Above, the sky begins to lighten by degrees, more gray than blue. It doesn't announce itself, it just becomes. The vessel's interior remains quiet, the kind of quiet that says the work is understood. On deck, everything is readying itself: rope, steel, rubber, air, and the slow, steady breath that will match the descent later. For now, there is only the gentle discipline of the start. The sea shifts. The lights hold. The bench stays solid beneath your hands. And the morning continues, calm and practical, as though it has done this many times before and sees no reason to change. The equipment bench now sits in a slightly brighter wash of morning light. The lamps along the rail have not been switched off yet, but the sky beyond them has begun to lift from charcoal into a softer gray. That change happens slowly enough that it almost escapes notice. The sea continues its steady movement against the hull, each swell rising and settling without hurry. The harness already rests comfortably across your shoulders, its weight familiar and balanced. One hand moves across the bench toward the pair of cylinders standing upright in their cradle. The metal surfaces carry a faint chill from the night air. Your fingers trace along the side of the nearest tank before reaching the valve at the top. The wheel turns a fraction. A quiet breath of compressed air slips through the regulator as the valve opens fully. The sound is short and clean. You pause for a moment to listen again, making sure no stray hiss follows. The pressure gauge lifts slowly as the regulator settles into place. Numbers rise across the dial until the needle reaches its expected mark. Your hand steadies the tank briefly before letting it rest back into the cradle. Next to the cylinders lies the regulator assembly. The hoses curve gently across the bench in dark loops. Each connector catches the faint light from the lamps as you lift the assembly and guide the first stage onto the valve. The fitting seats with a solid click. You tighten the yoke screw carefully, feeling the metal thread turn beneath your fingers. Once it stops moving, you give it one final small turn, just enough to hold firm without strain. The regulator now hangs neatly against the tank, hoses arranged so they will not snag when lifted. Your thumb presses lightly against the purge button. Air flows through the mouthpiece in a quick burst. The sound fades almost immediately, leaving the surrounding quiet untouched. The regulator settles again against the cylinder with a gentle sway. Beside the tank sits a folded buoyancy vest. You lift it from the bench and shake it open once. The heavy fabric spreads out across your forearms. A faint scent of salt remains from previous dives. The straps hang loosely, waiting to be adjusted. You guide the vest over the cylinders and slide the harness webbing through the mounting loops. The weight shifts slightly as the pieces settle together. Your hands move along the straps, pulling each one until the vest rests firmly against the tank. Buckles snap closed in a tidy sequence. A short inflator hose lies coiled near the edge of the bench. You pick it up and connect the coupling to the low-pressure port. The connector slides into place with a quiet tap. A gentle squeeze of the inflator button sends a small amount of air into the vest. The chambers expand slightly. Not enough to lift the equipment, only enough to confirm that the mechanism responds smoothly. You release the button, and the vest relaxes again. For a moment, you rest both hands against the assembled gear. The cylinders remain steady in their cradle. The hoses curve naturally across the vest without crossing or twisting. Everything sits where it should. Beyond the rail, the sea has begun to show color now. The gray surface reflects a faint silver where the rising light touches it. Small ripples pass beneath the vessel, carrying reflections that stretch and fade along the hull. A gull passes somewhere overhead. Its call drifts across the open water before disappearing again into the morning air. Your attention returns to the bench. A mask rests beside the equipment, its clear lens catching the growing light. You lift it carefully and hold it toward the sky. The glass reveals no scratches or grains of sand. Your thumb moves once around the silicone edge, confirming the seal remains smooth. The strap stretches once between your hands before settling back against the frame. You place the mask beside the vest where it can be reached easily later. The deck beneath your boots gives a soft creak as the vessel shifts with another slow swell. The movement travels upward through the soles of your feet and into the bench. Nothing on the surface slides or tips. Everything holds its place. The assembled gear now waits quietly in front of you, air sealed inside the cylinders, straps lying flat, hoses resting in gentle curves. Morning continues to widen across the water. The light grows softer and more even along the deck. The sea keeps its slow rhythm against the hull. The work of preparation moves forward step by step, steady and deliberate, as the day settles into its first quiet hour. The bench now holds the assembled cylinders and vest. Nothing moves except the slow lift and fall of the vessel beneath your feet. A small wooden tool chest rests near the corner of the table. The lid carries scratches from many seasons at sea. Your hand settles on the iron latch. The metal feels cool beneath your fingers. You lift the latch and raise the lid. The hinges open with a soft wooden creak. Inside the chest, tools lie arranged in narrow compartments. Each space has been carved carefully to hold a single object. A brass knife rests in the first slot. The handle shows a smooth shine where many hands have held it. You lift the knife and turn it slowly in the light. The blade catches the pale morning glow. The edge remains clean and straight. Your thumb moves along the spine of the blade, careful not to touch the cutting edge. You return the knife to its place. Next to it lies a small chisel. The wooden handle has darkened with age. You lift it briefly and check the steel tip. The point remains sharp enough to loosen barnacles or pry small objects from wood. The chisel returns to its compartment. A coil of thin salvage line rests beneath the tools. You lift the coil and feel the rope slide across your glove. The fibers feel dry and strong. You unwind a short length and examine the weave. No fraying appears along the surface. The line coils neatly again in your palm. You place it beside the knife on the bench. At the back of the chest sits a small brass lantern. The glass panels show faint salt marks from previous dives. You lift the lantern carefully. It carries more weight than it appears. Your fingers twist the small cap at the top. The lid opens, revealing the wick and oil chamber inside. You check the level of oil. Enough remains for the work below. The cap closes again with a quiet turn. You set the lantern on the bench beside the salvage line. The surface carries faint chalk marks from an earlier dive. You lift the slate and brush your glove across it. The chalk fades into a soft gray dust. The board becomes clear again. A small piece of chalk sits tied to the corner by a short string. You test the knot that holds it. The string remains secure. The slate returns to the bench beside the lantern. A soft thud reaches the deck as a swell presses against the hull. The vessel rises slightly, then settles again. The movement passes through the bench beneath your hands. Nothing shifts. Everything remains steady. Your hand moves back toward the tool chest. At the far end rests a pair of iron hooks. The hooks are small but heavy. You lift one and turn it in your palm. The curved point reflects the growing daylight. These hooks will help secure objects to the lift line. You place the hook beside the coil of rope. The chest now holds only a few remaining tools. You close the lid gently. The latch settles back into place with a quiet click. The selected items remain spread across the bench. Knife, chisel, salvage line, lantern, slate, iron hook. Each piece rests within easy reach. Beyond the rail, the sea continues its slow breathing motion. The horizon now shows a pale band of silver light. Morning has begun to settle across the open water. The deck remains quiet. Your hands rest briefly against the edge of the bench. The wood feels solid beneath your palms. The tools wait patiently beside the diving gear. The sea continues its steady rhythm beyond the ship, and the careful preparation of the dive moves forward, one simple step at a time. Morning light has strengthened slightly across the deck. Gray water stretches outward beyond the rail, its surface folding slowly as long swells pass beneath the vessel. Reflections from the sky ripple across the metal fittings along the side of the ship. Near the stern, a heavy guide rope disappears into the water. Its thick fibers slide gently against the edge of the rail as the vessel shifts with the tide. A small bell-shaped weight is attached further along the line, helping the rope hang straight toward the seabed below. Your hand reaches for the rope. Rough strands press against the glove as you lift the line a short distance from the rail. The rope carries a slight tension from the weight below. It holds steady in your grip without jerking or slackening. A slow pull tests the connection. The line responds with a firm resistance that travels upward through the fibers and into your arm. That tension confirms the guide weight remains properly set beneath the water. Your grip loosens. The rope settles back against the rail with a quiet scrape of fiber against metal. Next to the guide line sits the signal cord used to communicate between diver and crew. It runs through a pulley mounted to a short iron post before descending toward the sea. Your fingers slide along the thinner cord. The weave feels tighter than the heavy guide rope. Small knots appear at regular intervals along its length, each knot placed deliberately to help the diver identify signals even without sight. You draw the line toward you. The cord moves easily through the pulley wheel. A faint creak sounds as the wheel turns once and then settles again. Two short pulls travel down the cord. After a brief pause, the rope answers with two matching tugs returning upward from the water below. Someone below deck has already secured the lower line to the diving bell frame. Your hand releases the cord. It falls gently back into place beside the pulley. A pair of iron hooks rests nearby on a small wooden rack. Their curved shapes are used to attach lift lines to objects found below the surface. One hook lifts from the rack. Weight settles into your palm as the metal turns slowly between your fingers. Rust marks appear along the base where the hook meets its eyelet ring. You guide a short length of salvage rope through the ring. The rope slides easily through the opening before forming a loop around the hook's base. A simple knot secures the line so the hook cannot slip free. A firm tug confirms the knot holds. Metal meets rope with a solid connection. The hook returns to the rack, now attached to its prepared line. Wind crosses the deck in a faint sweep of cool air. It moves lightly across the equipment bench before passing over the rail and into the open sea. A gull circles somewhere above the mast, its wings catching the first pale color of sunrise. Below the rail, the water shows a deeper shade now. Light reaches the surface, but fades quickly beneath it. Somewhere below that dark layer rests the wreck marked on the morning charts. Preparation continues slowly. Your hand moves toward the lantern placed earlier on the bench. The small brass frame lifts easily, glass panels reflecting the growing daylight. A thumb turns the wick control. The wick rises slightly. The adjustment remains small, just enough to ensure the flame will burn clearly once lit beneath the water. Nearby tools remain where they were placed earlier. Knife, chisel, slate, salvage line. Nothing has shifted from its position. Across the deck, the quiet rhythm of the sea continues beneath the hull. Ropes move gently against the rail, and the guide line disappears steadily into the water below. Morning grows slowly brighter across the open horizon. Preparation advances one careful task at a time, each movement simple and deliberate as the dive draws closer. Gray light now spreads fully across the open water. The horizon has become clearer, forming a pale line where sea and sky separate. Gentle swells continue their steady rise and fall against the hull, carrying the vessel in a slow, predictable rhythm. Near the stern, the diving platform waits beside the rail. It is a narrow wooden frame fixed to iron brackets along the side of the ship. Years of use have worn the boards smooth. Salt has bleached the grain of the wood to a pale color. A ladder descends from the platform into the water. Its lower rungs disappear beneath the dark surface. Your boots step onto the platform. The wood answers with a quiet creak as weight settles across the boards. Slight movement from the vessel travels upward through the frame and into your legs. A low rail runs along the outer edge of the platform. Your hand rests briefly on the wood. The surface feels cool and slightly rough beneath the glove. Beside the ladder, the diving equipment waits where it was placed earlier. Cylinders, harness, regulator. Straps lie neatly arranged so nothing crosses or tangles. Both hands lift the harness from the bench. Weight settles across your shoulders as the cylinders shift into place along your back. The metal tanks press firmly against the vest, balanced carefully along your spine. A strap passes across your chest. Your fingers guide the buckle together. Metal meets metal with a small click. Another strap secures the waist. The belt tightens slowly until the equipment rests snug against your body. The weight remains noticeable but stable. One hand reaches back to adjust the position of the tanks. A short shift settles the cylinders slightly higher along the harness. The change allows the load to balance more evenly. Breathing remains steady. Your hand moves to the regulator hose. The mouthpiece lifts toward your face. Rubber presses gently between your teeth as you draw the first test breath. Air flows smoothly through the valve. A second breath follows. The sound of compressed air remains soft and even. No resistance. No irregular flow. The regulator performs exactly as expected. Your hand returns to the platform rail. The sea below shows a darker shade now that the sky has brightened. Surface ripples reflect pale streaks of morning light. Just beneath the waterline, the ladder fades into shadow. Guide ropes drift gently beside the platform. One thick rope runs straight down toward the seabed. A second line marks the location of the wreck below. Both lines move slightly as the tide shifts. Your hand grips the ladder rail. The metal feels colder than the air above the deck. One boot lowers onto the first rung. Water moves quietly around the ladder posts. Small ripples form where the wood meets the sea. Another step brings you lower. The surface reaches your boots. Cold water presses around the suit as the ladder descends further beneath the surface. Your grip on the rail remains steady. The vessel above shifts slightly with the swell. That movement travels through the ladder and into your hands. A final glance rises toward the deck. Ropes remain secured along the rail. Tools rest on the bench. Lantern and slate wait where they were placed earlier. Morning light spreads across the ship. Your attention returns to the ladder, one step lower. Water now surrounds the harness and tanks. Cold pressure settles evenly across the suit as the sea accepts your weight. The guide rope drifts beside you, its line disappearing into the darker water below. Hands tighten briefly on the ladder rails. Breathing continues through the regulator in slow, steady rhythm. Air enters, air leaves. Above, the salvage vessel remains calm and unmoving against the widening morning sky. Below, the quiet water opens into deeper shadow where the wreck waits on the seabed. The first descent of the day has begun. Cold water closes gently around the ladder as you move another step downward. The metal rails remain firm beneath your hands. Each rung carries a thin layer of seawater that glints briefly in the growing daylight above the surface. Your boots descend one level at a time. Water rises past the cylinders on your back and presses evenly along the diving suit. The pressure feels steady rather than heavy, a slow tightening that settles naturally around your shoulders and chest. Above, the platform becomes quieter. Voices from the deck fade as distance increases. The creak of wood and the soft movement of ropes remain faintly audible through the water. Another step. Your helmet dips beneath the surface. Light changes immediately. The clear morning brightness breaks into shifting patterns as waves pass overhead. Sunlight scatters through the water, forming pale ribbons that drift slowly across the ladder and the surrounding sea. Your hands slide lower along the rails. Metal feels colder here, chilled by the deeper water. Tiny air bubbles slip upward along the ladder posts, rising toward the surface in small silver streams. The final rung approaches. Your boots leave the ladder. Weight transfers into the water as you release the rails and allow the suit to settle into its natural balance. A slow breath through the regulator keeps the body steady. Air moves quietly through the mouthpiece. A long exhale sends a chain of bubbles rising past your shoulder. They twist upward toward the pale light above. The guide rope hangs just ahead. Your hand reaches forward and wraps around the thick line. The rope carries a gentle tension from the weight attached below. It sways slightly with the motion of the water, but never drifts far from its position. Your body tilts forward. A small kick moves you away from the ladder. The vessel's hull appears to the side now, a dark wall stretching upward toward the bright surface. Faint streaks of light ripple across the metal plates as waves move overhead. The rope leads downward into deeper blue. Your grip adjusts along the fibers. Gloves press against the rough strands as you slide slowly lower, guiding yourself along the descent line. Sunlight fades gradually. The bright surface above becomes a shifting mirror of silver and pale gold. Beneath that reflection, the water darkens into a calmer shade of blue. Particles drift quietly through the water. Tiny fragments of sand and plankton float in slow suspension around the rope. Each movement of your fins sends them swirling gently before they settle again. Breathing remains steady. Air enters the regulator with a soft rush. Bubbles leave your mouthpiece in smooth streams that pass upward along the rope. A faint shape begins to appear below. At first, it looks like nothing more than a darker patch in the water. As you descend further, the outline becomes clearer. The seabed lies beneath you. A broad field of pale sand spreads outward in every direction. Ripples carved by the tide run across the bottom like shallow waves frozen in place. The descent rope ends at a heavy iron weight resting on the sand. Your fins touch the seabed beside it. A small cloud of fine sediment lifts gently into the water before settling again. The rope remains steady in your hand. You release your grip slowly and allow your body to balance above the sand. Above, the vessel now appears far away. Only the faint outline of the hull and the thin line of the ladder remain visible through the water above. Around you, the underwater world rests in quiet stillness. Soft light filters down through the shifting surface far overhead. The guide rope stretches upward toward the ship. Beyond it, the open water extends outward in calm blue silence as the first moments on the seabed settle into place. Water settles quietly around your shoulders, while the seabed stretches in every direction beneath the dim light filtering down from above. Fine grains of sand rest in shallow ridges across the bottom. Each ridge forms a gentle curve shaped by the slow movement of the tide. Your fins remain still for a moment, so the disturbed sediment can settle again. The iron weight anchoring the descent rope sits partly buried beside you. Its dark surface shows rough patches where years of salt have left small marks across the metal. The thick rope rises from the ring at the top of the weight and disappears upward into the brighter water near the surface. Your hand reaches down toward the rope. Rough fibers press against your glove as your grip closes around the line. The rope remains steady beneath the water, its weight keeping the descent path clearly marked. A slow breath moves through the regulator. Air flows smoothly into your lungs before leaving again in a quiet stream of bubbles. The bubbles rise past your shoulder and twist upward toward the distant surface. Your fins move gently against the sand. The small push lifts your body forward just enough to clear the iron weight. The rope remains beside you as you begin moving away from the base of the descent line. Light grows slightly dimmer with each movement across the seabed. The water holds a soft blue tone now rather than the silver brightness near the surface. Suspended particles drift slowly around you, catching faint traces of light as they move. Your hand slides along the guide rope. Each section of the rope carries a small knot placed at intervals along its length. The knots help confirm direction and distance during the descent and return. A few slow pulls move you farther along the line. The seabed begins to change slightly beneath your fins. Sand gives way to scattered patches of darker sediment. Small fragments of shell and stone lie half buried between the ripples formed by the tide. Your fins lift carefully to avoid stirring too much sand. Each motion remains slow and controlled. Breathing continues through the regulator in steady rhythm. Air enters, air leaves. Bubbles drift upward in quiet chains. Ahead, a faint shadow begins to form along the seabed. At first, it appears as an uneven shape where the sand grows darker. Another slow movement forward brings the outline into clearer view. Wooden beams lie partially buried beneath layers of sediment. Some timbers angle upward from the sand, while others remain flat against the seabed. The surfaces carry rough textures where the wood has broken and worn over time. This is the first sign of the wreck. Your hand leaves the guide rope. The line continues stretching upward behind you toward the vessel above. In front of you, the scattered beams extend outward across the seabed like the remains of a collapsed frame. One fin moves carefully forward. The tip touches the sand before lifting again. Sediment rises in a soft cloud and drifts slowly through the water before settling back down. Your body remains balanced above the bottom. Careful movement prevents unnecessary disturbance to the surrounding sand. Another breath passes through the regulator. Air flows in smoothly. A line of bubbles rises past your helmet and disappears into the dim water above. Your hand reaches toward one of the exposed timbers. The wood feels rough beneath your glove. Small grooves run along its length where the grain has split and softened under years of salt water. Your fingers lift slightly from the surface again. The timber remains fixed where it rests in the sand. Nearby, another beam lies at a different angle, forming the faint outline of the wreck's outer structure. Light from the surface reaches the seabed in soft, broken patterns. Each ripple of the sea above shifts the pale glow that drifts across the timbers and sand. Your fins move slowly once more. The body glides forward along the edge of the broken structure. Behind you, the descent rope still marks the path back to the vessel. Ahead, more of the wreck begins to emerge from the seabed as the quiet exploration continues beneath the calm morning sea. Water remains calm around the scattered timbers as your fins carry you slowly along the edge of the wreck site. The sand beneath you lies mostly undisturbed again. Only a faint haze of sediment drifts where your earlier movement lifted the seabed. Those particles settle gradually back into the shallow ripples carved by the tide. Broken beams continue appearing ahead. Some sections lie flat against the sand, while others tilt slightly upward where the original structure collapsed. Dark gaps between the wood reveal deeper pockets where sediment has collected. Your hand reaches toward the nearest beam. Gloved fingers brush across the surface of the timber. The wood feels softened by years beneath the sea. Long cracks follow the grain where water and pressure have slowly opened the fibers. Small growths cling to the edges. Pale shells attach themselves along the cracks in the wood. A few strands of seaweed drift gently against the beam before floating away again with the slow movement of the water. Your body glides a little closer. Fins move in short, careful strokes to keep from stirring the sand too quickly. Each motion pushes a thin wave of water forward across the seabed. Light from above fades slightly as you move deeper along the wreck. The bright surface now appears as a distant silver layer far overhead. Only a soft glow reaches the sand where you travel. Ahead, the shape of the wreck begins to form more clearly. Two large ribs of the hull curve upward from the seabed like the frame of a broken arch. Their outer surfaces show the dark color of aged wood. Sediment has gathered along the lower edges where the beams meet the sand. Your hand moves toward one of the ribs. The timber rises higher than the scattered planks behind you. Fingers rest briefly along the curve of the beam. Rough edges press against the glove. The wood no longer carries the smooth finish it once had. Time beneath the water has stripped the surface down to the bare grain. A slow breath enters through the regulator. Air moves quietly through the mouthpiece. Your exhale sends another chain of bubbles drifting upward along the beam before they disappear into the dim water above. You move around the curved rib. Beyond it, more of the wreck becomes visible. The hull lies partly collapsed along one side. Large planks form a sloping wall that leans gently into the sand. Some sections remain joined together while others have separated and fallen outward. Dark openings appear between the beams. Inside those spaces, the water looks almost black compared to the pale sand outside. Sediment fills the deeper cavities where the deck once rested above. Your fins pause again. Movement slows while your eyes follow the lines of the structure. The shape of the vessel begins to reveal itself piece by piece. A long section of hull extends across the seabed to your right. Broken timbers lead toward what once formed the midsection of the ship. Your hand lifts toward a length of rope attached to the harness. The salvage line remains neatly coiled at your side. Its fibers float slightly in the water until you guide the coil back against your body. One fin moves gently forward again. Sand shifts beneath the tip before settling. Your path continues along the outer edge of the wreck where the structure rests partially buried in sediment. Another beam rises ahead, thicker than the others. The shape suggests part of the original keel. Your fingers reach toward the timber. The wood feels solid beneath your touch despite its long time beneath the sea. Sediment covers the lower half where it sinks into the sand. You release the beam and drift forward once more. Behind you, the guide rope still marks the path back toward the descent point. Ahead, the wreck spreads wider across the seabed. More of the ship's broken frame becomes visible with each careful movement through the quiet water. Movement carries you slowly along the outer edge of the wreck while the seabed slopes gently downward beneath the dim water. Broken timbers continue to spread outward across the sand. Some beams remain half buried beneath layers of sediment, while others lie exposed where currents have cleared the surrounding sand. A section of hull rises slightly ahead. The wood curves upward in a shallow arc before disappearing beneath another drift of sand. Long iron bolts still pass through the planks, holding parts of the frame together despite the collapse of the ship above. Your hand moves toward the curve of the timber. Gloved fingers press lightly against the surface. The wood feels firm, but uneven, its outer layer softened by years beneath the sea. Small shells cling along the edges of the plank. They form pale clusters against the darker grain of the timber. Your fins lift gently from the sand. A careful stroke carries your body forward along the curved section of hull. Sediment rises in a faint cloud where the water shifts near the bottom. Those particles drift slowly behind you before settling again. Breathing continues in a steady rhythm through the regulator. Air moves inward with a quiet flow. Another stream of bubbles leaves the mouthpiece and travels upward past the broken beams above. Light from the surface grows slightly dimmer as the wreck blocks part of the glow from above. Dark shapes form beneath the collapsed structure where the deck once covered the interior of the ship. Your movement slows as the hull opens into a larger gap. Inside that opening lies a section of the lower deck, now tilted toward the seabed. Loose boards rest against one another where the frame gave way during the sinking. Your hand reaches toward the lantern secured along your harness. The small brass frame lifts free from its clip. Glass panels catch the faint light filtering down through the water. Your thumb turns the wick control slightly. The motion remains small and careful. A spark ignites within the chamber. A narrow flame rises along the wick and steadies. Its warm glow spreads outward through the glass, pushing a soft circle of light into the darker water around the wreck. Wooden beams near the opening brighten. Details appear more clearly now. Cracks in the timber. Iron nails driven through the planks. Fragments of rope caught along the frame. Your arm extends slowly into the opening. Light spills across the tilted boards inside the hull. Dust-like sediment lifts gently from the surfaces as the water shifts around the lantern. Several loose objects lie scattered across the deck remains. Small metal fittings, fragments of broken pottery, a length of rope half buried beneath the sand. Light touches one beam, then another, revealing the quiet remains of the ship's lower structure. A breath leaves the regulator. Bubbles rise toward the broken ribs above the opening. Behind you, the open seabed remains faintly visible. Ahead, the quiet interior of the ship waits beneath a soft glow as the exploration continues deeper along the broken structure. Light spreads gently across the tilted boards inside the broken hull. Soft gold from the flame moves across the timber as the water shifts around the wreck. The glow reveals lines in the wood that remain hidden in the dim blue light beyond the lantern's reach. Light slides along the beam nearest to you and settles across the floorboards resting beneath the collapsed structure. Several loose objects lie scattered across the boards. A small iron fitting rests partly buried beneath fine sand. Nearby, a narrow length of rope lies twisted between two planks where the current has carried it over time. Your fins remain steady above the seabed. Careful movements keep the sediment from rising too quickly into the water around the lantern. A slow breath passes through the regulator. Air enters quietly. Another stream of bubbles drifts upward past the broken ribs of the hull before fading into the darker water above. Your free hand moves toward the iron fitting. Gloved fingers brush gently across the sand covering its surface. A small cloud of sediment lifts as the object is uncovered. The shape becomes clearer. A curved metal hook emerges from the sand where it rested along the boards. Your fingers close around the hook and lift it slowly. The metal carries a faint layer of rough corrosion, but still holds its shape. A small eyelet remains fixed at one end where a rope once passed through. The hook turns once in your palm. Your other hand reaches toward the salvage line attached to your harness. A short length of rope unwinds easily from the coil. The line floats gently in the water beside you. You guide the rope through the eyelet of the hook. A simple knot secures the line in place. Your fingers tighten the knot with a short pull to ensure it will not slip free. The hook now rests at the end of the salvage rope. The lantern moves closer again to the deck boards. Light spreads across the sand where the hook had been resting. Beneath the disturbed sediment, a small wooden crate becomes visible. Only one corner of the crate remains exposed. The rest lies buried beneath layers of sand that have settled across the wreck. Your hand reaches toward the edge of the crate. Wood meets your glove as you brush away a thin layer of sediment. The grain appears darker where the wood remains protected beneath the sand. A second brush clears a little more of the surface. The crate reveals its shape slowly as the sand drifts aside. Metal bands run along its sides, holding the wooden boards together. The bands remain intact despite the years beneath the water. Your hand guides the hook toward the metal band. The curved point slides beneath the edge of the band where it meets the crate. A gentle pull confirms the hook has caught securely. The salvage rope tightens slightly in your hand. The hook holds firm. Your hand reaches toward the signal line attached to the harness. A short tug travels upward through the rope. A pause follows. Another tug answers from above. The crew on the vessel has received the signal, and you release the line. The rope leading to the crate tightens gradually as the lift begins from the surface. Sediment lifts gently as the crate shifts free from the sand. Wood rises slowly from the seabed, carried upward by the steady pull of the rope. Above, the crate continues its slow ascent through the dim water. Around you, the wreck remains still against the seabed. Broken beams, tilted boards, sand settling again where the crate once rested, while the quiet exploration of the ship continues beneath the calm morning sea. Fine grains drift slowly through the water before falling again into the shallow gaps between the planks. The place where the crate rested moments ago now appears as a slightly darker patch where the sediment has not fully returned. A slow movement carries you along the edge of the broken hull. The lantern travels with you, its warm glow sliding across the wooden beams that form the exposed frame of the ship. Light touches one rib of the hull, and then another, revealing the curved structure that once held the vessel together. Several ribs still stand upright. Others have fallen outward and now lie across the sand at uneven angles. Your free hand reaches toward one of the upright timbers, and you let your gloved fingers settle against the surface. The wood feels rough and deeply grooved where the grain has opened after years beneath the water. Small shells cling along the edges of the beam, forming pale clusters against the darker wood. Your hand lifts away again. Movement continues slowly along the outer side of the wreck. You find more scattered objects resting between the ribs of the hull. Fragments of broken pottery lie half buried in the sand. A narrow metal fitting rests beside one of the beams, its shape partly hidden beneath a thin layer of sediment. Your fins move in short, controlled strokes. Each motion pushes a gentle current across the seabed without disturbing the sand too heavily. Breathing continues through the regulator in calm rhythm. Air enters with a soft flow. A line of bubbles leaves your mouthpiece and rises upward through the open ribs of the hull before fading into the dim water above. Your attention shifts toward a darker section ahead. The ribs of the ship grow closer together near this part of the wreck. Between them lies an opening where the hull has collapsed inward. Wooden beams form a narrow passage leading deeper into the structure. Sand has gathered along the lower boards, creating small drifts where the current slows. Your body tilts slightly forward. A gentle push from your fins moves you closer to the opening. Light from the lantern spreads across the beams, revealing small details along the wood. Iron nails protrude from several planks. Thin strands of rope remain caught around one of the ribs where rigging once ran along the deck. Your hand reaches toward the rope. The fibers feel stiff beneath your glove. A careful tug confirms the rope is still tangled around the timber and cannot be lifted free. You release it. Inside the narrow opening, the wreck reveals more of its interior shape. A long beam runs along the floor where the lower deck once stood. Smaller boards lie across it in uneven layers where the structure collapsed during the sinking. Movement slows while you study the passage ahead. The glow of your light reveals a shallow trail in the sand that winds between the beams. Your body glides forward another short distance. Sediment lifts slightly before settling again behind you. The lantern now hangs inside the opening formed by the collapsed hull. Light touches the interior boards and the curved ribs that frame the space. Behind you, the open seabed remains faintly visible through the broken structure. Ahead, deeper sections of the wreck begin to appear as the careful exploration continues beneath the quiet water. You can see farther into the narrow opening while your fins guide you carefully between the curved ribs of the hull. Broken beams form a loose frame around the passage. Some timbers lean inward while others remain fixed in the sand where the ship settled long ago. Light moves slowly across their surfaces, revealing rough grain and small patches of pale shell growth. Water remains calm inside this section of the wreck. Only the faint movement of your fins disturbs the sand resting across the floorboards. A thin cloud of sediment lifts briefly before settling again into the grooves between the planks. Your body moves forward another short distance, and more of the ship's structure appears. A long support beam runs along the center of the floor where the deck once rested above. Several smaller boards lie scattered across it, haphazardly where the upper structure collapsed. Your hand reaches toward the beam, and your fingers brush across the surface. The wood feels slightly firmer here than the outer timbers. Parts of the beam remained sheltered beneath the deck during the years underwater. Your hand lifts again. Movement continues slowly along the beam toward the darker end of the passage. A round shape lies half buried in the sand between two boards. Light settles across the object, revealing the curved surface of a brass compass casing. Sediment covers part of the metal, leaving only the outer rim visible. Your free hand moves toward the sand. Fingers brush carefully along the surface, lifting a thin layer of sediment away from the object. The compass emerges slowly from the sand. The circular lid remains closed, held by a small hinge along one side. You lift the instrument gently. Metal feels cool beneath the glove. Your thumb presses against the lid. The hinge opens with a slow movement. Inside, the compass card rests beneath the glass. The needle remains still in the quiet water, pointing steadily across the dim interior of the wreck. Your hand holds the instrument for a moment. Light from the lantern glows across the glass before you close the lid again. The salvage basket hangs from your harness at your side. You guide the compass into the basket and secure the lid across the top so it cannot drift free. The lantern lifts again toward the passage ahead. Light moves along the beam and across the surrounding boards. Further inside, the wreck opens slightly where another section of the hull collapsed. Wooden ribs frame a wider space beyond the passage. Your fins move gently once more. The body glides forward along the beam. Behind you, the narrow entrance remains faintly visible where the outer hull broke open against the seabed. Ahead, the lantern's glow reaches into the broader interior of the ship, while the quiet exploration continues deeper within the wreck. Ribs of the hull curve upward on both sides, forming a rough arch of dark timber above the seabed. Sections of the upper deck have collapsed inward, leaving broken planks scattered across the sand. Your fins move gently. A small push carries you forward beneath the curved beams. Sand lifts slightly where the water shifts near the bottom, then settles again into the shallow grooves formed by the tide. More wooden boards lie fractured where the structure gave way. Some planks remain joined together while others outcast across the sand. Your hand reaches toward one of the boards. Gloved fingers press lightly against the surface. The timber feels worn, but still solid beneath the water. Thin cracks run along the grain where years beneath the sea have opened the wood. Your hand lifts away again. Movement continues across the interior of the hull. The lantern travels ahead of you, its glow sliding across the scattered remains of the ship's lower deck. A cluster of narrow shapes rests near the base of one rib. Three long metal cylinders lie side by side across the sand. Their dark surfaces carry patches of rough corrosion where the metal has aged beneath the water. Cannons, your fins pause. Light spreads across the nearest cannon, revealing the round opening of its muzzle and the thick metal ring near the base where rope once secured it to the deck. Your hand moves toward the cannon, your fingers settling along the curved metal. The surface feels cold and uneven beneath the glove. Small clusters of shells cling along the edges of the barrel. A faint cloud of sand lifts as your hand shifts across the metal. The first cannon remains fixed where it lies, partly buried beneath the seabed. Another lies nearly level across the sand, and the third tilts slightly where one end has sunk deeper beneath the sediment. Iron rings remain attached near the base of both barrels. Your hand lifts toward one of those rings, fingers wrapping briefly around the metal. The ring feels thick and heavy. You release it again. Breathing continues steadily through the regulator. Air enters with a soft flow. Bubbles rise upward through the ribs of the hull before fading into the darker water above. Your fins move again in small strokes. The lantern travels slowly along the row of cannons. Beyond them, the wreck extends further toward the stern of the ship. Broken timbers form a loose barrier where another section of the deck collapsed during the sinking. Nails protrude from several boards where the planks once joined together. Between two beams lies a small open space where the sand has cleared. Your body almost instinctively glides toward the gap. Ahead, the broken ribs and beams reveal another section of the ship's interior, where the quiet exploration continues beneath the dim water. Wooden ribs lean inward from both sides, forming a low arch above the sand. Sections of deck planking lie scattered beneath them, some partly buried, others resting loosely across the seabed. Water slides gently across the boards as your body glides forward through the opening. Sediment lifts in a thin veil behind you before settling again across the wood. The lantern travels slightly lower. Its glow reaches beneath the curved ribs and spreads across the interior floor of the wreck. Small details emerge within the warm circle of light. Iron nails remain driven through several planks. Short fragments of rope lie tangled near the base of a beam. A metal hinge rests partly buried beneath the sand. Your free hand moves toward the hinge. Gloved fingers brush away the thin layer of sediment covering the metal. The hinge reveals its shape slowly, one plate still attached to a short length of wood. You leave it where it rests. Movement continues deeper into the interior of the ship. As the light slides along a larger timber ahead, you notice this beam lies thicker than the surrounding boards and appears to run across the width of the hull. Its position suggests part of the ship's support frame beneath the deck. The wood feels solid beneath your hand, its surface ridged where the grain has opened over time. You turn toward the far side of the beam and see several objects rest along the sand beside it. At first, they appear as small shapes scattered across the seabed. Soon the shapes become clearer, a cluster of coins strewn across the sand. The round metal pieces sit partially buried where the wreck settled years ago. Some coins remain stacked loosely against one another, while others have rolled into shallow depressions between the boards. Your fins stop moving. The lantern lowers toward the sand. Light spreads across the coins, revealing dull surfaces where corrosion has softened the metal. Your free hand reaches toward the nearest piece. Gloved fingers brush aside a thin layer of sediment. The coin lifts slowly from the sand. You turn the coin once in your palm before placing it into the salvage basket secured to your harness. Another coin follows. Your hand gathers several pieces one at a time, placing each into the basket where they settle quietly together. More coins remain scattered across the sand. Some lie close together in small groups, while others rest separately near the edges of the boards. Your hand collects a few more pieces before leaving the remaining coins where they lie. Sediment drifts gently back into place across the sand. Behind you, the cannons remain faintly visible through the broken structure. Water shifts gently across the sand as your body glides beyond the wide support beam. Timbers form a narrower corridor here. Two ribs of the hull lean toward one another, leaving a space just wide enough to pass between them. Broken boards rest across the sand beneath the curved beams. Your hand reaches briefly toward one of the ribs. The surface feels rough where the grain has opened after years beneath the sea. Small shells cling along the edges of the beam. Your hand lifts again. Movement continues through the narrow space, and you find another part of the interior deck where the structure has settled deeper into the seabed. Several wooden planks remain aligned across the floor. Others have slipped apart, leaving shallow gaps filled with sediment. A faint shimmer catches the lantern light ahead. The glow rests across a metal object lying near the base of one plank. Light spreads across the object and reveals the curved shape of a small brass telescope. One end of the instrument rests against the board, while the other lies partly buried beneath sand. Your hand moves toward the telescope. Gloved fingers brush gently across the surface, clearing the thin layer of sediment that covers the brass tube. The instrument lifts slowly from the seabed. Sections of the tube show faint engravings where the brass once held polished detail. You turn the telescope once in your palm. The small lenses remain sealed within the ends of the tube. Water has left faint marks across the glass, but the instrument still holds its shape. The salvage basket opens slightly as your hand guides the telescope inside. Metal settles quietly against the coins already resting within the basket. Fragments of pottery rest between two planks where the deck collapsed inward. A metal buckle lies half buried near the edge of the sand. You leave these objects undisturbed. Your fins push gently against the water. Movement carries you forward beyond the corridor of ribs. The interior of the ship begins to widen once more. Lantern light spreads across a larger section of the wreck ahead. Broken beams rise from the sand at several angles. Between them lies a darker space where the structure slopes downward toward another part of the hull. Your breathing remains steady. Air flows quietly through the regulator. A line of bubbles rises past the ribs above before fading into the dim water overhead. Behind you, the narrow corridor remains visible through the lantern's fading glow. Ahead, deeper sections of the ship appear gradually as the careful exploration continues within the silent remains of the wreck. Light reaches across the sloping section of the wreck where the floor begins to dip lower toward the stern. Broken beams frame the space in uneven angles. Some timbers remain partly upright, while others lean across the sand where the structure collapsed inward. Water flows gently across the seabed as your body glides toward the darker section ahead. Sediment lifts briefly behind you before settling again across the boards. Warm light spreads across the wood, revealing long planks that angle downward beneath the collapsed frame. Several ribs of the hull curve overhead, forming a shallow tunnel along the floor of the ship. You reach out and feel another rough, rugged surface and continue along the sloping boards. A broken beam lies across the path ahead. Its thick timber stretches from one rib to another, resting just above the sand. Light spreads across the wood and reveals iron nails driven through the plank where it once joined the surrounding frame. Your hand steadies against the beam. A gentle push lifts your body slightly upward. Your fins glide slowly over the timber before lowering again onto the sand beyond. The lantern follows your movement. Light spreads across the seabed on the far side of the beam. The floor here appears less crowded with broken boards. Sand has collected in small drifts where the current moves through the open ribs of the hull. Timbers form a partial wall where the rear section of the ship once stood higher above the deck. A faint shape appears along the sand ahead, a curved edge of a wooden chest resting near the base of the stern wall. Part of the chest remains buried beneath the sand. Only the upper corner of the lid and a metal band across the wood are clearly visible. You come to a near stop above the chest, and you move your hand slowly toward the exposed corner. Your fingers brush lightly across the wood. Sediment lifts in a thin cloud before settling again around the chest. The box remains firmly lodged within the sand where it came to rest long ago. Behind you, the interior beams of the wreck fade gradually into darkness. Ahead, the buried chest rests quietly along the sloping floor as the exploration continues deeper within the stern of the ship. The glow from the lantern reveals a strip of dark wood bound by a metal band that runs across the lid. Sand gathers along the lower edge where the box sinks into the seabed. Small grains drift slowly upward each time the water shifts. Your fins remain still for a moment. The sediment stirred by your earlier movement settles again across the surrounding boards. You brush a layer of sand, revealing more of the chest lid. The grain of the wood appears tightly packed where the surface remained protected beneath the sediment. You carefully trace your hand slowly across the metal band. The strip feels solid beneath the glove. Corrosion has darkened parts of the iron, but the shape of the band remains firm. You brush away another small drift of sand along the edge of the chest. More of the lid becomes visible. The outline of the box begins to form clearly now. One corner of the chest sits slightly higher than the rest, tilted where the surrounding boards collapsed during the sinking. A small iron latch appears near the center of the lid. Your hand moves toward it. Gloved fingers test the latch with a gentle pull. The metal shifts slightly, but does not open. Sand still presses against the edges of the chest, holding the lid firmly in place. Your hand returns to the surrounding sand. Slow movements brush away another layer of sediment along the lower edge of the box. Fine grains lift into the water before drifting away from the lantern's glow. The chest remains partly buried. Only the upper half now stands free of the sand. Your breathing continues in a calm rhythm through the regulator. Air moves quietly inward. A stream of bubbles rises past the stern beams before fading into the darker water above. Your hand reaches again for the latch. Fingers curl gently around the metal. A careful pull lifts the latch upward, and this time the metal moves freely. The lid shifts slightly beneath your hand, but does not open fully. Sediment still holds the lower edge of the chest against the sand. Darkness rests inside the chest. You shine your light, so a warm glow reaches through the narrow space beneath the lid, and shapes begin to appear within the box. Small cloth bundles lie packed tightly together inside the chest. The fabric looks faded beneath the water, but remains mostly intact where it has been protected from the open currents. Your fingers release the lid, and the chest closes again gently. Water shifts across the sand as your body glides away from the chest. The box remains resting in the seabed where it settled long ago. Lantern glow spreads softly across the stern section, while the buried chest rests quietly behind you. Water moves gently through the ribs of the hull. Each slow shift of the current carries tiny grains of sand across the boards before they settle again along the seams in the wood. Your fins move with a small push. The body glides away from the chest and along the inner curve of the stern frame. Light travels ahead of you, sliding across the angled beams that support the rear section of the ship. Several timbers rise higher here. Their curved shapes form the rounded structure of the stern. Sections of wood still remain joined together, where the ship's outer frame held firm during the sinking. Your free hand reaches toward one of the beams. Gloved fingers rest briefly against the wood. The timber feels thicker than the boards along the lower deck. Deep grooves follow the grain where years beneath the sea have slowly worn the surface. Your hand lifts again. Movement continues along the inside wall of the stern. A narrow ledge is revealed, formed by a broken plank that tilts upward from the sand. Several objects lie scattered along this ledge. A small metal cup rests against the edge of the plank. Beside it lies a fragment of carved wood that may once have belonged to the ship's interior fittings. There is a metal surface that appears dull beneath the water. Its round rim remains mostly intact, though one side has bent inward where the wreck shifted. Your hand moves toward the cup. Gloved fingers lift the object carefully from the plank. The cup turns once in your palm as you inspect it before you gently release the piece into the salvage basket secured to your harness. The basket settles again against your side. Another shape appears near the base of the stern beam. A narrow wooden case lies partly buried beneath the sand. Only the upper portion remains visible above the sediment. Your hand brushes gently along the surface. The lid reveals a simple carved pattern running across its length. Fine grains of sand drift upward as the wood emerges from the seabed. You lift the small case carefully. The object remains light enough to move easily through the water. Its lid stays closed, held by a small wooden peg along the side. The piece joins the other items inside the salvage basket. Your fins move again. The lantern rises slightly as your body drifts farther along the stern interior. Broken ribs continue arching overhead. Light reaches between them and falls across the sand in soft, shifting patterns. Behind you, the chest remains faintly visible where it rests along the sloping boards. Ahead, the stern structure narrows again, where several beams lean together toward the center of the wreck. You continue with the quiet exploration of the ship beneath the calm water. A darker section of the stern lies ahead where several beams converge. Lantern glow reaches into the space first, revealing a narrow chamber formed by the curved ribs of the hull. Boards from the upper deck have fallen across the opening, leaving a triangular gap just large enough to pass through. Sand shifts lightly across the floor as your movement carries you into the chamber. Wooden ribs arch overhead in a tight curve. Each beam shows deep grooves where the grain has opened beneath years of salt and pressure. Small clusters of shell growth cling to the outer edges of the wood. Your free hand reaches toward one of the ribs. Gloved fingers press briefly against the timber to steady your position. The wood feels solid despite the rough surface beneath the glove. Your hand releases the beam. Further inside the space between the boards rests a narrow iron bracket. The piece appears bent where the structure collapsed during the sinking. A small drift of sand gathers along one side of the bracket. Your hand moves across the boards. Gloved fingers brush away the loose sediment. The metal bracket reveals its full shape as the sand clears from its edges. You leave it where it rests. Movement carries you farther along the chamber. Lantern light reaches the far wall of the stern, where a thicker beam runs horizontally across the interior frame. The timber appears darker than the surrounding boards. A rectangular panel sits beneath that beam. The panel has separated from the wall and now leans slightly forward against the sand. Its surface shows faint carved lines where decoration once marked the stern cabin. Your hand reaches toward the panel, your fingers feeling along the edge of the wood. The piece shifts slightly when you apply gentle pressure. There you navigate a small gap that opens behind the panel to reveal a narrow compartment hidden within the stern wall. The space appears shallow but protected from the open water. Several objects rest inside the compartment. A folded length of cloth lies along the back of the cavity, and beside it sits a small leather pouch that has darkened after years beneath the sea. You reach into the opening and lift the pouch carefully from its resting place. The leather feels stiff but remains intact. You place the pouch into the salvage basket beside the other items. The cloth remains inside the compartment, and your hand lingers on the folded fabric for a moment before the panel is guided gently back against the wall. Your hand releases the wood. The panel settles once more along the sand where it had leaned before. Breathing continues through the regulator in an even rhythm. A slow exhale sends a stream of bubbles drifting upward along the curved ribs of the stern. Your body glides away from the chamber, and the narrow space fades behind you. Beyond the ribs, the wider interior of the wreck becomes visible again, while the exploration continues through the quiet remains of the ship. Dim illumination from the small lantern spreads across the curved ribs as you move away from the stern chamber. Broken timbers rise on both sides, forming the rounded shape of the ship's rear frame. The sand below remains smooth, except where earlier movement disturbed the surface. Your fins push lightly against the water. The body glides out of the narrow stern passage and back into the wider interior space. Wood and sand pass slowly beneath you as the wreck opens again into a broader section of the hull. You breathe steadily through the regulator, whilst your hand reaches briefly toward a nearby beam. You allow the beam to take your weight and steady your position. The surface carries deep ridges where the grain has worn away beneath years of current and salt. Your grip loosens. Movement continues across the interior floor. A thicker section of sand appears ahead where debris has gathered against a line of fallen planks. Several objects rest partly buried where the boards collapsed during the sinking. Your arm lowers toward the seabed. A curved metal shape emerges beneath the thin layer of sediment. Your fingers brush the sand aside. The object reveals itself as another small brass compass housing, separate from the earlier instrument recovered deeper in the wreck. This one remains sealed inside a square wooden frame designed to hold it steady during navigation. You lift the frame carefully from the sand. Wooden sides remain intact despite the long years beneath the sea. The brass ring at the center reflects a faint shimmer from the lantern. The framed compass turns slowly in your hand before joining the other items resting inside the salvage basket. Your attention returns to the scattered boards nearby. A short length of chain lies partly hidden beneath one plank. Its dark iron links curve loosely across the sand. You leave the chain undisturbed. Fins move again in a gentle motion. Water shifts across the seabed while your body glides beyond the fallen boards. The wreck begins to thin in this direction. Large ribs of the hull appear farther apart as the structure opens toward the outer edge of the ship. Between those ribs, the open seabed becomes visible once more. Soft patterns of filtered sunlight reach the sand beyond the broken frame. Your hand adjusts the position of the basket along your harness. The collected objects settle quietly inside. Behind you, the stern chamber fades gradually into shadow between the curved beams. Ahead, the edge of the wreck stretches toward the open water where the seabed lies undisturbed beyond the broken hull. Open seabed begins to appear beyond the last ribs of the hull. The structure of the ship thins in this direction, leaving wider gaps between the beams where sand has settled into gentle ridges. Small fragments of wood rest along the edges where the outer planks once formed the side of the vessel. Your fins move in a slow, steady motion. Water flows smoothly around the wreck as you glide toward the outer edge. The curved ribs pass behind you one by one until the broken frame opens fully to the surrounding seabed. The ocean floor stretches outward in pale sand. Long ripples cross the surface where the tide has shaped the sediment over time. Only scattered pieces of debris mark the place where the ship came to rest. Breathing continues through the regulator. Air enters quietly. A soft trail of bubbles rises upward and disappears into the dim water above. Your attention shifts toward a small cluster of objects lying several feet from the hull. Metal fittings and fragments of hardware rest half buried in the sand where they must have fallen during the sinking. Your body drifts closer. A careful movement of your fins keeps the sand from lifting too quickly into the water. One object catches your attention first. A narrow metal hinge lies partly exposed along the surface. The hinge plate appears bent where the structure collapsed. Your hand reaches down. Gloved fingers lift the piece slowly from the sand. Fine grains slide away as the hinge clears the seabed. The metal feels rough beneath the glove. You guide the hinge into the salvage basket. Another item rests nearby. A small iron buckle lies between two ridges of sand. The frame remains intact, though corrosion has darkened the surface. Your hand gathers the buckle. The piece joins the other items inside the basket, where it settles among the recovered objects. Movement carries you along the outer edge of the wreck. The broken hull remains visible behind you, while the seabed ahead appears clear and open. A length of rope lies stretched across the sand a short distance away. The rope looks different from the guide line connected to the vessel. This one appears older, its fibers worn and stiff where it has rested beneath the water for years. Your hand lifts a section of the rope. The strands crumble slightly beneath your fingers. The rope returns to the sand. A slow push from your fins moves you farther along the edge of the wreck. More scattered debris appears across the seabed. A narrow metal hook rests near a fragment of broken plank. Your hand gathers the hook carefully and secures it with the other salvage pieces. The basket now holds a small collection of objects recovered from the ship. Metal fittings, coins, navigation instruments, small tools that once belonged to the crew. The seabed remains calm around you. Only the slow movement of water carries sand across the rippled surface. Behind you, the dark frame of the wreck stretches quietly along the ocean floor. Ahead, the open seabed continues outward, while the careful search along the outer hull proceeds beneath the still water. A short distance from the wreck, the seabed lies mostly clear. Only small fragments remain scattered across the sand, where currents have carried lighter debris away from the hull. The darker outline of the ship stretches quietly behind you, its ribs rising faintly above the ocean floor. Your body moves slowly across the sand. Careful fin strokes guide you toward another small patch of objects resting between two shallow ridges formed by the tide. Sediment shifts gently beneath the water. Tiny grains drift upward and then settle again along the rippled surface. Breathing remains even through the regulator. Ahead, a narrow glint of metal catches your attention. The lantern's glow falls across a small cluster of items lying close together. Several round coins rest across the sand, partly buried where they must have fallen from the wreck long ago. Your movement slows. The body hovers just above the seabed while your hand lowers toward the coins. Gloved fingers brush lightly across the surface of the sand. Fine sediment drifts aside, revealing the edges of the metal pieces beneath. One coin lifts easily from the seabed. Its surface shows faint markings worn smooth by time beneath the water. You place it into the salvage basket. Another coin follows. The metal discs settle softly against the other recovered objects already resting inside. A third piece remains deeper in the sand. Your fingers brush away the surrounding sediment until the edge becomes visible. The coin lifts free and joins the others in the basket. Nearby, a small metal fitting rests beside a fragment of broken plank. The fitting appears to be part of a ship's rigging system, once used to guide rope along the deck. Your hand gathers the piece and adds it to the basket. Movement continues along the sand. Your fins push lightly against the water, carrying you across the seabed parallel to the edge of the wreck. A narrow trail of disturbed sediment follows behind you before settling again across the ripples. The dark structure of the hull remains visible over your shoulder. Beyond it, the interior beams fade gradually into shadow. Ahead, another small object lies partially buried near the base of a sand ridge. The shape appears long and narrow. Your hand reaches toward it. Fingers brush the sand away from its surface. A small iron spike emerges from the sediment. The spike likely served as a fastening tool for deck planks or cargo crates. You lift it carefully and secure it within the basket. The collected items now rest together along your harness. Metal pieces shift slightly with each movement, but remain contained inside the basket. Your fins move again in a slow stroke. The body glides across the sand as the search continues along the quiet seabed beside the wreck. A wider stretch of sand extends beyond the scattered debris. Rippled ridges run in long lines across the seabed, where the tide has shaped the sediment over many seasons. Only a few fragments of wood remain here, resting far from the broken hull behind you. The wreck now appears darker in the distance. Curved ribs rise faintly above the ocean floor, marking the place where the vessel came to rest. The structure looks smaller from this angle, its timbers blending into the deeper blue water around it. Your fins guide you along the outer perimeter. Slow movements keep the sand from lifting into heavy clouds. Each motion carries the body gently forward across the quiet seabed. Air passes steadily through the regulator. A soft trail of bubbles rises toward the surface far above, disappearing before reaching the faint light filtering through the water. Ahead, a long line becomes visible across the sand. A rope stretches outward from the direction of the wreck, its fibers resting partly beneath the sediment. The line must have once secured cargo or rigging before the ship settled on the ocean floor. Your hand reaches toward the rope. Gloved fingers lift a section of the line from the sand. The fibers feel stiff and fragile after years beneath the sea. Several strands separate slightly as you turn the rope in your hand. You lower it carefully back to the seabed. The rope falls gently into place along the ripple of sand where it had rested. Movement carries you further along the wreck's outer boundary. A narrow wooden plank lies ahead, half buried beneath sediment. One end of the plank rises slightly where the sand has shifted beneath it. Your hand brushes the surface. The plank lifts a fraction before settling again when the surrounding sand presses against it. Nothing remains attached beneath it. You leave the wood undisturbed. A few feet farther along the seabed, another object rests between two ridges of sand. The shape appears heavier than the surrounding debris. Your hand reaches toward it. Grains drift aside as your fingers clear the sediment from the surface. A small iron cleat emerges from the sand. The curved metal once held ropes secured along the deck of the ship. Corrosion has darkened the surface, but the shape remains solid. You lift the cleat slowly from the seabed. The piece settles into the salvage basket beside the other recovered items. Your fins move again. Water flows smoothly around the wreck site as you continue along the outer edge of the debris field. The seabed ahead remains mostly clear now. Only faint traces of the ship's scattered cargo appear across the sand. Behind you, the hull rests quietly in the deeper water. Broken beams and ribs fade gradually into shadow. Ahead, the open seabed stretches calmly outward, while the careful search continues along the quiet floor of the ocean. Farther along the seabed, the scattered debris becomes less frequent. Sand stretches outward in long, pale ridges where the current has shaped the floor of the ocean. The broken hull remains behind you now, its dark frame only faintly visible through the water. Your movement slows. Careful fin strokes carry you across the open stretch of seabed, while the disturbed sediment settles again along the rippled surface. Air continues flowing through the regulator. A quiet stream rises from your exhale and drifts upward through the water column. The salvage basket rests against your side. Metal objects shift slightly inside with each motion, but remain secure within the frame. Ahead, a darker patch interrupts the pale sand. Your body glides toward it. As the distance closes, the darker shape reveals itself as a shallow depression where heavier fragments have gathered. Small pieces of wood lie across the sand. Several metal fittings rest among them. Your hand lowers toward the seabed. Gloved fingers brush aside a thin layer of sediment near the edge of the depression. A narrow brass plate appears beneath the sand. The plate lifts slowly as you guide it free from the seabed. Its surface shows faint engraved lines where markings once indicated measurements or positions on a navigational device. The brass plate joins the other objects inside the basket. Your attention shifts toward a short length of chain lying nearby. Several links rest across the sand, while the remainder disappears beneath a piece of broken timber. You lift one section of the chain. The iron feels heavy even beneath the water. After a brief inspection, the chain returns to the seabed where it had rested. Movement continues across the open area. Your fins guide you gently along the outer boundary of the wreck site. A final cluster of debris lies several feet ahead. Two wooden fragments rest beside a small metal hook partly buried beneath the sand. Your hand gathers the hook. Grains slide away from the metal as the object lifts free. The piece settles with the other recovered fittings inside the basket. Beyond this point, the seabed becomes clear again. Only the soft ridges of sand remain visible. Behind you, the wreck stretches quietly along the ocean floor, its broken ribs and beams resting where the ship finally came to rest. The surrounding water remains calm while your search gradually slows along the edge of the silent wreck site. The outer edge of the debris field lies quiet now. Pale sand spreads in long ripples where the current has moved gently across the ocean floor. Only a few faint marks remain where scattered fragments once rested. Your movement becomes slower. A light motion from your fins carries the body across the final stretch of seabed surrounding the wreck. Disturbed grains drift upward for a moment before settling back along the ridges. The dark outline of the ship rests behind you. Broken ribs rise faintly from the sand, their curved shapes marking the boundary of the wreck. Sections of timber lean against one another where the structure collapsed during the sinking. Breathing remains steady through the regulator. Your attention turns back toward the hull. The slow search around the wreck has come to its final pass. Only open sand remains ahead, with no further debris scattered across the seabed. Your fins angle slightly toward the guideline. The rope can be seen again in the distance, rising toward the vessel far above the water. Its thick fibers form a straight path through the dim light. A calm push of your fins begins the return. Water moves smoothly around you as the body glides back across the sand. The basket along your harness shifts slightly with the motion, the recovered items resting quietly inside. Your hand reaches briefly toward the seabed as you pass. Gloved fingers brush across the sand, leaving a faint trail along the ripple before lifting away again. The guide rope grows clearer ahead. Its weighted base rests on the sand where you first arrived earlier in the dive. Your fins slow as you approach the weight. The metal block sits partly buried where the line holds steady against the current. Your hand closes around the rope. Rough fibers press gently against the glove. The line remains firm beneath your grip. A slow glance across the seabed reveals the quiet remains of the wreck site. The hull lies dark against the sand. Broken beams and scattered planks form the shape of the vessel beneath the water. No movement disturbs the structure now. Only drifting particles pass slowly through the calm water around the wreck. Your body steadies beside the rope. Breathing continues in the same slow rhythm. Air flows in, air flows out. The dive has reached its final moments on the seabed. Above you, the guide line stretches upward through the dim water toward the vessel waiting on the surface. Your hand remains closed around the guide rope, while the seabed rests quietly beneath your fins. The heavy weight at the base of the line sits half buried in the sand where it anchors the descent path. Fine grains shift slightly along its edges before settling again into the shallow ripples formed by the tide. Your body steadies beside the line. A calm breath moves through the regulator. Air enters smoothly. A thin stream of bubbles rises upward along the rope before disappearing into the dim water above. Your fins angle downward. A gentle push lifts the body slowly away from the seabed. Sand drifts softly beneath you as the ocean floor begins to fall away. The wreck remains visible behind you. Curved ribs and broken planks stretch across the seabed where the ship settled long ago. From this distance, the structure appears quieter, its dark outline blending into the surrounding sand. Your grip adjusts slightly along the rope. Gloved fingers slide upward across the rough fibers. The line remains firm and straight as it leads toward the vessel far above. Another careful movement of your fins raises your position higher in the water. The seabed grows more distant. Ripples of sand fade into softer shapes as depth increases between you and the ocean floor. Breathing continues through the regulator in an even rhythm. Below, the wreck begins to disappear into the deeper blue water surrounding the site. Broken beams fade gradually until only the faint outline of the hull remains visible. You pause for a moment, and your body floats quietly in the water while the rope supports your position. Above, the surface appears as a pale sheet of shifting light. Sunlight filters down through the moving waves, forming bright patterns that drift slowly through the water column. Your hand reaches higher along the rope. A steady pull carries you farther upward. Water moves gently around the cylinders on your back as the ascent continues. The distance between you and the seabed increases steadily. The wreck now appears small and still below, resting undisturbed where it settled years before. Another breath passes through the regulator. Bubbles rise in a smooth column beside the rope. The guide line continues upward through the brightening water toward the vessel waiting above the surface. Your ascent continues slowly along that path, leaving the quiet wreck resting on the seabed below. Your grip rests on the guide rope while the ocean floor lies far below. The heavy weight that anchors the line now appears small against the pale sand. Broken ribs of the wreck stretch quietly beside it, their dark shapes fading into the deeper water around the site. Your fins move with a gentle motion. The body rises slowly along the rope. Water shifts across the diving suit as the ascent begins in steady, controlled movements. Air passes through the regulator in a calm rhythm. A quiet exhale sends a trail of bubbles drifting upward past your shoulder. Light grows slightly brighter with each moment. Sunlit patterns shimmer across the water column above, moving slowly with the rhythm of the sea at the surface. Your hand slides upward along the rope. The rough fibers guide your path through the water. Below, the wreck continues to grow smaller. Timbers that once formed the hull now blend into the surrounding sand. The outline of the ship becomes softer as distance increases. Another slow kick carries you higher, and the seabed fades further into the dim blue beneath you. Particles suspended in the water drift past your mask, catching faint reflections from the growing daylight above. Your body steadies for a moment. The rope holds firm in your hand. Air flows in through the regulator, releasing gentle bubbles through the water. The guideline stretches upward. Its path remains straight as it leads toward the vessel waiting above. Your fins move again. A calm push lifts the body farther along the rope. The wreck below is now only a distant shadow across the ocean floor. Above, the water grows lighter and clearer as the ascent continues toward the surface. The water grows brighter as you continue upward along the rope. Light from the surface filters down through slow-moving waves. Pale bands drift across the water around you, shifting gently with the motion of the sea above. Your hand moves higher along the line. The fibers slide beneath your glove as you guide yourself steadily upward. The wreck is now far below. From this height, the broken hull appears only as a dark shape resting across the pale seabed. Curved ribs of timber form a faint pattern against the sand before fading into the surrounding blue. A calm breath passes through the regulator. Air enters smoothly, and the bubbles twist and widen as they climb toward the brighter water above. Your body rises another few feet along the rope. Water flows gently around the cylinders resting against your back. The equipment remains balanced as you continue the steady ascent. Particles drift through the water around you. Tiny fragments catch the light as they pass across your field of view. Some float upward with the bubbles while others move slowly sideways with the current. Your hand slides upward again. The rope remains straight and firm, stretching toward the vessel above. The surface now appears closer. Sunlight breaks across the underside of the waves, creating shifting mirrors of silver and white. Each swell bends the light into moving patterns that travel across the water column. Another quiet breath moves through the regulator. A chain of bubbles rises quickly now, reaching the surface in a few short seconds. Your fins pause briefly. Your body floats calmly in the water while your hand holds the rope. The sea around you feels open and spacious compared with the confined spaces inside the wreck below. A gentle push of your fins continues the ascent. The guide line leads directly toward the hull of the vessel waiting above. Its dark shape begins to appear through the water near the surface. Sunlight reflects along the underside of the hull, forming a darker shadow across the moving waves. Your hand climbs another length of rope. The surface grows nearer. Light brightens across the water around you, while the quiet ascent continues toward the waiting vessel overhead. Light brightens steadily as the surface draws nearer. Sunlit waves ripple above like shifting glass, their pale reflections spreading through the water column. Each swell bends the light into slow patterns that drift across your mask and shoulders. Your hand moves further along the rope. Rough fibers slide beneath your glove as the guide line leads upward toward the vessel waiting above. The outline of the hull now appears clearly. Dark metal stretches across the water overhead, forming a broad shadow where the ship rests against the surface. Gentle movement from the waves causes the shadow to sway slightly from side to side. Your fins move once more. A calm stroke lifts the body higher through the water. The regulator continues its steady rhythm. Air enters, air leaves. This time, a small chain of bubbles escapes and rushes upward past your face, spreading across the surface as they reach the air above. Your head approaches the underside of the waves. Light becomes sharper here, broken into bright fragments by the constant motion of the sea. Your hand slides one final length along the rope. The surface opens directly above you. Water parts as your mask rises through the shifting waves. Fresh air and morning light meet you at once. The hull of the vessel rests nearby, its side rising above the waterline where ropes hang down toward the sea. Your hand reaches toward the ladder secured against the side of the ship. Metal rails remain wet from the spray of the waves. Your fingers wrap around the rung. Cold steel presses against the glove. Your fins drift gently in the water while the body steadies beside the ladder. Breathing slows naturally as the calm of the dive begins to settle. Below, the ocean stretches dark and quiet beneath the surface. Far down on the seabed, the wreck remains where it has rested for many years. Above, the vessel rocks gently against the morning sea as the final moments of the dive unfold beside the ladder. Your hands rest on the ladder rails while the vessel rises and settles with the slow movement of the sea. Metal rungs glisten with a thin film of water. Each small swell lifts the ladder slightly before lowering it again against the side of the hull. Your fins drift quietly beneath the surface. The weight of the cylinders remains steady across your back as you hold your position beside the ladder. Breathing continues through the regulator. Air moves in. A soft stream of bubbles slips past your shoulder and spreads across the water beside the ship. Your hand shifts one rung higher. Cold metal presses through the glove as your grip adjusts. The ladder remains firm against the side of the vessel. A slow movement lifts your shoulders clear of the water. Drops fall from the diving suit and return to the sea below. The open deck waits above the rail. Coiled ropes rest along the boards. The equipment bench remains where it stood earlier in the morning. Beyond the ship, the ocean stretches outward under the pale light of the rising day. Below the surface, the water darkens quickly. Far beneath the vessel, the wreck lies quietly on the seabed, its broken timbers resting across the sand where they have remained for many years. Nothing moves there now. Only the slow drift of water passes across the silent hull. Your hands remain on the ladder while the vessel rocks gently with the tide. The sea breathes around the ship. Morning light spreads across the open water, and the rest of the day will carry itself.